Jack is back. Welcome to Snap Judgments. They are brought to you by Buyers Auto. That is Jeremy Birmingham. I am Austin Ward. And Jack Sawyer has decided to come back for his senior season. And Berm, that is a pretty big deal.
Yeah, and it's not really a surprise. Jack hinted to it pretty strongly before the Cotton Bowl. And I think there were some people who wondered if maybe that Cotton Bowl performance would be enough to make him change his mind. And I think from talking to a few people around the situation, it actually just reinforced his decision because he's starting to see the result and starting to see what he can become on the football field. And one game or a couple games at the end of the year is not enough to really give you that momentum you want for the NFL. But another full season where he's played the way he's played in the last month, the last 4 games, would be putting him in the conversation to be probably a late first or a second day pick. And that's something that, as Jack Sawyer came out of Pickerington North High School as a 5-star defensive end, everyone had these high expectations. And now you're starting to finally see it come to fruition. And it's not just that to me, Austin. Like, Jack has emerged as the vocal leader of the defense in this season. Multiple times through the year, we've talked about things he said post-game. Multiple times we've talked about what he did at Michigan when walking up the tunnel. He was the only player speaking. At the halftime of the Cotton Bowl, walking off the field, he was saying, let's go, leader step up, leader step up. Like, he has been that guy, and he plays with high emotion on the field, and he's now as productive as he is talkative. And that is really good news for Ohio State. And to have him back is absolutely huge.
Yeah. And as you said, Berm, I mean, we've been waiting for him to look like the 5-star top 10 player in the country, whatever rankings you want to refer to back to his recruitment. And not all of this was within his control. I mean, I think his position and the weight management and everything that Ohio State asked him to do as a sophomore didn't do him any favors, but he did whatever the team asked him to do. You give him credit for that. But this now, you can tell that he's comfortable in his skin. He's comfortable at the position he's being asked to play, the weight that he's doing it at. And you saw that production steadily increase throughout the year. The sack totals are where you always start with a defensive end, and he had one in each of the last 3 games, including that hat trick there in the Cotton Bowl. But it was beyond that. The way he played against the run in the second half of the year, the number of pressures that he was getting, he was close to really ramping that total up to far higher than the 6.5 sacks that he finished this season with. And to your point, doing that once in the Cotton Bowl would turn the attention of some scouts and get a second look. If he does that 3, 4, 5, 6 times next year, maybe not 3 sacks every time, but multiple sack games and sacks throughout the entire season, which he still did not really do as a junior. That's where you start taking life-changing money and jumping into the first round. And I think a lot of these Ohio State players, the NIL helps. They don't have to force that decision. I'm not going to discount that part of it. But you add in the legacy part. You add in the understanding of how much more you can help yourself with a full season like that. Jack Sawyer, I think, is making a really good decision for him, and it's clearly a good decision for Ohio State.
The legacy part is something that all of these guys in the class of 2021 that are making these decisions are weighing heavily on their minds. That is double for a kid from Columbus. That is a kid who grew up rooting for Ohio State, watching Ohio State lose to Michigan the last 3 years as he's been a part of it. Like, it eats at everyone, but it has really, really eaten at Jack Sawyer, and you can tell that for sure when you talk to him about it. I think the simple truth is that early in this season, Ohio State's defensive ends were being asked to be pretty milquetoast and asking not to do a lot, making sure they contain the edge and set the edge, and Jack and JT Tuimoloau have done a great job at that. But as the season progressed, you saw the defense with Jim Knowles, whether it's Larry Johnson, whether it's Jim Knowles, whoever it is, kind of letting loose those reins a little bit. And all those near sacks that they got early in the season where it was like, oh, let's just go get the guy, I guess, turned into sacks when it came down to, hey, go get the guy. And that is a much different mindset. And I think it's really important for Ohio State as the Buckeyes and just Jim Knowles' defense continue to evolve and play a little bit more conservative on the back end. You have to be more aggressive up front if you're going to get to the quarterback. And if you have guys like Jack and JT Tuimoloau, who we're still waiting on a decision from, back, it changes that. It also alleviates a ton of stress on Ohio State from the lack of recruiting at the defensive end position in the last 2 years, because no one really expected these guys to return when this season started. And now you have an opportunity you get a bit of a reprieve from the governor here before the depth of that room is completely executed.
Yeah, and I think that some of what you're talking about there, like Jack Sawyer projected as a possible first round pick in August, like there's sometimes been this narrative with him that he's not lived up to the recruiting hypes or not fulfilled his potential. And I think in September, you could say that I was probably in that boat as well, that it didn't look like he was having the impact on the game that I projected at defensive end this year. Some of that seemed schematic more than, again, not everything is about just Jack Sawyer. There are a lot of other moving parts that affect a player's individual production, the team success, and other factors. I'm not pinning that on Jack Sawyer. I think that Ohio State had to figure out the way it wanted to use him and the best way to deploy him. And once everybody got on the same page, I think that's where you saw the gradual improvement there and a real explosion, obviously late in the year. But even saying that, he's still been the most productive sack player on this team for the last 2 years. And you could say, well, 4.5 should not lead Ohio State in sacks. And I'd say, yeah, that's probably true. And 6.5, as it was this year, you can probably boost that number and Ohio State's pass rush would be much better off. That's also correct. But some of that stuff is beyond his control. And he's now a player with 14 sacks in 3 years who's coming back with a ton of momentum. So even if the sophomore year didn't work out the way Jack Sawyer would have envisioned, or even if the first part of this year wasn't as productive as maybe he would have liked or we would have expected to see from him, it has not been a waste. All of this is building towards something that next year could be really special, and in a lot of ways has already become that for him.
Yeah, and no one likes to do the wait till next year thing, and I understand people saying, oh, that's what's been said the last 2 years. It was January of 2001 when Mike Doss decided to return to Ohio State for his senior season, and a little different scenario. Doss was a 2-time All-American, and he decided to come back and finish out what he started, and it paid off in a major way. And now Mike Doss, because Ohio State came back and beat Michigan and won the national championship, is revered as one of the best, most beloved Buckeyes of all time. Some of that's because he's from Ohio, and Jack Sawyer being from Ohio puts him in a position to ride that sort of wave. And obviously none of that's going to matter if they come out next year and don't handle the things they need to handle. But Jack has been the ringleader of this whole movement to get everyone to come back. And now we've only seen Tyleik Williams and now Jack Sawyer make that announcement officially at the time of this video. But the momentum is certainly in the direction that all these other guys, JT Tuimoloau, Denzel Burke, Lathan Ransom, Jordan Hancock, are going to do the same. And if that happens, Jack Sawyer deserves a ton of credit for that. So the things that he's done on the field, which have been getting better and better every year, like I said at the start, I think that those things almost pale in comparison to the impact that he's had on the roster, because the leadership of this team has been somewhat muted, and Tommy Eichenberg's a great leader and the guys love him, but you still don't see it all the time. And Jack is taking on that mantle, and I think someone had to do it. And I think, generally speaking, when it works the best at Ohio State, it's from a kid who understands what Ohio State football is to his core, and Jack Sawyer does that better than anybody on this roster.
I think the month of December it really underlined that. When you're talking about vocal leadership and standing up for the program and setting the tone, I know sometimes that people don't like it when we do this and assign value to media settings and talking and being the face of the program, but there were very few opportunities for Ohio State to actually talk and defend their program and talk about 2024. Jack Sawyer was a participant in the on-campus media day. He represented the team again at the Cotton Bowl during the defensive media day. And when they had to find people to go talk and sit next to Ryan Day at the podium after they lost the Cotton Bowl, Jack Sawyer was the pick for the defense to go do that. Nobody wants to be in that situation. And a lot of people ask out and say, I'm not going to do it. Jack Sawyer knew he was going to go in there and being asked about a loss. He knew that he would be asked if his good game changed his mind about coming back next year. And he was sitting next to Lincoln Kienholz and hearing some things about the quarterback situation and slings and arrows that were going on there for both the coach and the quarterback. And Jack Sawyer vocally, without being asked about it, vouched for Lincoln Kienholz, said that he did a hell of a job, the way he battled. He said that he thought that the rest of the guys were still on the same page for 2024, didn't want any of the credit for the 3 sacks, That stuff is important to me. And if other people don't feel that way, that's fine. But we've been doing this long enough. If you don't have the people that are willing to do that in situations that are good and bad, and December was bad for Ohio State, like that tells you more about the culture than if nobody came out at all. Jack Sawyer was willing to do that, and he's going to do it again in 2024.
Yeah, and I think a lot of people, maybe this is our fault, like, or maybe it's because the world of college football and media has changed a little bit in the last couple of years. Those guys that come out are not required to do so, and they choose to do it. And so for Jack to consistently step up and take those shots for the defense and take the shots for the program, I think says a ton about him. And it's why when Ohio State recruited him and he committed, I think it was on the day of the Super Bowl in 2019. He was the first ever guest of Bermanology when I was filming it in my basement with a wood panel background and looked terrible. I had no idea what I was doing, how to he was really the first guest of this iteration of what we do as a podcast. And he was the leader of the 2021 recruiting class when it started. And he's the leader of the 2021 recruiting class now as they head into what looks to be a pretty impactful senior season for a large swath of those guys. And people rightfully can look at the numbers over the first couple of years and maybe make critical comments, but the overall impact that Jack Sawyer has made is not yet finished. And I think people should be absolutely thrilled that he's made this decision public.
Yep. Big deal for Ohio State. Big deal for Jack Sawyer. We break it down, as always, on Snap Judgments that are brought to you by Buyers Auto. Jack Sawyer's back. He's Jeremy Birmingham. I'm Austin Ward. Thanks for joining us. We'll talk to you later.